I made a stop motion story about my ancestor, Anna Fur. It is about her and her journey on in her faith and her how she converted and got baptized and how she went on to go on a trek. This was my first animation. I think it took a reasonable amount of time, not long or short, but it was very fun and I had my best friend with me and so I wasn't bored at any time.
I chose to make an animation about my something great grandpa and his pioneer trek. There was this one really hard scene where you had to move like a bunch of small bricks for it to look good. It was a water scene and you had to move the water bricks and able for it to look like moving water. I think that other deacons' quorums or just anybody could make a project about their family history and they would like maybe get to know better their ancestors instead of just reading about them, but they make a film about them.
Regula Fur was born in March 1826 in Switzerland. By the time she was 18, she was an educated nurse and really wanted to become a doctor. She got her wish and got her degree around 1850. Sometime later, she met missionaries from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and was later baptized a member of the church. She immigrated to America and headed west with other saints. She also changed her name to Anna. In the Iowa City, she bought a wagon and some oxen to go west. She ended up giving away the wagon and oxen away to a poor family that needed it more and got herself a handcart instead. Anna is limited to 17 pounds of personal items in her handcart. She left behind her beautiful blue dress and some other items so she could keep her medical supplies and instruments. She traveled with the Ellsworth and MacArthur Handcart Company. One of the hardest parts was crossing large sandy places. The wheels of handcarts and wagons were in deep almost to the boxes. The trek across the wilderness was over 1,300 miles. It was a long, hard, tiring journey, but most of the saints kept in good spirits. Anna's handcart company entered the Salt Lake Valley on September 26, 1856. A month later, she married an immigrant from Italy named John Carden on October 20th and started her new life.
July 11th, we started for Iowa City. July 28th, we still remained here, perhaps on account of some of the cattle being lost. July 29th, still on this place, about 3 miles from the city of Iowa. August 29th, began to ferry at 8 o'clock across the Elkhorn and had all ferried across at about 12. Here's how I think it really happened. And now back to the real story. We had our dinner and started about 2 o'clock, traveled 3 miles, mostly through a sandy road, arrived at the Rawhide Creek, where we camped for the night. August 24th, Sunday. A cow was killed today and was divided among us, 1/2 pound each. The snow now came upon us, and being so cold The oxen wore out. Many of them were now froze to death, which rendered us almost impossible for us to travel. In the midst of all this uncertainty and doubt, our hopes were realized. For lo and behold, Joseph A. Young and 2 others with him came riding into the camp. A council was held in which it was decided that we should leave our clothing and cooking utensils, except what was absolutely necessary, such as a blanket to wrap ourselves in and the clothing we stood in.
We had an activity where we digitized photos and film, and I thought it was really cool because you could just take like these really dark little pieces of film and then you put them in a little slot and the camera had like a whole photo on it. So I thought that was really cool.
It wasn't technical at all. You just had to kind of slide it through, take a picture, slide it through again, take a picture. Well, that was for film. For the pictures, all you had to do was put the pictures facing upside down, and then it would scan them all at once, and then you just had to make sure it all turned out right, and that was it.
My part of the project was learning how to digitize negatives with a phone. So we got a back, and then we put the negatives on top of that, and then took a picture of it with the iPhone, and it just did all the work from there.
It felt a lot closer to the person who I was scanning the photos for. Well, I mean like who was in the photos, because when you're like indexing, they are a person on paper and you get all sorts of information about them, like maybe how much they weighed at birth. But when you're scanning pictures, sometimes you're gonna know the person who brought it in fact, most of the time, and it might even be you. And you get to know the person in the photos through like their emotion and what they decide to take pictures of. And it just lets you get to know that person without having to have a single word.
So 18 months after I was born, I contracted a disease called polio. And my dad was investigating the church at the time. And our home teachers, Bishop happened to be one of our home.
We interviewed a James's brothers, sister James, and we talked about their life and their conversion to the gospel. And it was just really cool to hear how they both, neither of them grew up in the gospel, and they both, Brother James was in biker gangs and he owned a tattoo parlor, and you know, just lots of, if you wouldn't think, the most spiritual of things. And so they both grew up and then got married and then converted to the gospel together, and we got to talk about their conversion story.
And I definitely thought it was really cool compared to other family history activities that we did, because we actually got to sit there and hear their life story. It was definitely a lot more involved, a lot more interesting. And it was cool because most of the stories that the people in our ward told were like things that we could easily apply to our lives. So it was definitely a good experience, something I think everyone should do in their quorums.
I don't think I would have learned it unless I went to the Jameses and really talked to them, because I'm a visual learner and I got to see firsthand how the gospel has changed these people's lives and how they've become better for it. And when you're doing indexing, you just kind of like see, oh, this person grew up in the 1900s and he, I don't know. You just see a lot of stories online, and it's a lot different when you're in person, talking face to face. I learned a lot more seeing it.
Yeah, so I just edited the video. It was pretty cool because I got to rewatch it and just edit it in a cool way. The Jameses had a really strong testimony of tithing.
he said we can make it over there and we can make it back, and they had X amount of dollars to do it with. And from Pocatello to Boise at that particular time was a 9-hour trip.
No interstate.
No interstate. So you had to go through every little town all the way up here, up Highway 30. Okay, so they got here, visited with me for a day, got in the car. They spent the night, seen me the next morning, got in the car and was driving back. And when they got to Burley, they stopped to buy gas. And Dad put $2.50 in the car. And he had 1 dime left. He put $2.50 in the car and bought a sandwich that they split. And he had 1 dime left. When they got home, before he left, they paid their tithing. When he got home, that dime lasted him for 2 weeks. They had people in the ward that had brought them food. They had a lady across the street that said her freezer had went out, and she gave them a bunch of meat. Back then, gardens were plentiful. Mom cooked her own bread. Anyway, at the end of that 2 weeks, still had the dime.
He's like had a really strong testimony of tithing, and he's missed paying once. So that's another cool story. Probably you wouldn't know unless you had a video like this to watch.
Yeah, I think this experience with this family has made me want to do it more often with other people, hear about their life, and hear about how they've come to be who they are today. And like my grandparents, for once, I know they have a lot of stories, and I think it would just be cool to dive deep and really learn about how they became converted to the gospel. And yeah.